About a year ago, my life completely fell apart, and I need to get this off my chest. I never imagined I'd be sharing this on Reddit, but I guess that's what happens when your family goes insane and you have nowhere else to turn. Anyway, let me start from the beginning, because trust me, this is one of those what the heck just happened situations. My friend Dave has a sister, Jenny, and I've known both of them for years. We grew up in the same neighborhood, hung out occasionally, nothing serious. Jenny was always a bit different. I don't want to sound mean, but she's had some mental health issues. I don't know all the details, and frankly, it's not my business. Dave never talked about it much, and I never pried, but it was common knowledge that Jenny had her struggles. About a year ago, Jenny suddenly contacted me, telling me she was pregnant. Okay, fine, right? Except for one tiny detail, she told me I was the father. I swear, my brain short-circuited in that moment. I was like, wait, what? Let me be clear, I've never even kissed Jenny, let alone been intimate with her. Not once. So for her to accuse me of this ridiculous thing, I just couldn't wrap my head around it. I told her straight up, Jenny, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm definitely not the father. We've never been that close. But she just kept repeating it, as if I would magically remember a night that never happened. It was utterly bizarre. I tried to stay calm, thinking maybe this was part of her mental health issues, but deep down, I was panicking. This is where things started to go off the rails. Jenny refused to get a prenatal paternity test. I was sitting there thinking, if you're so sure it's my kid, why not just get a test to prove it? But she wouldn't budge. She kept saying things like, you need to take responsibility for your child, and you're abandoning us before the baby's even born. It was pure emotional manipulation, and I wasn't buying it. So I made it clear, if she didn't get a paternity test, I wasn't signing any papers. I wasn't going to be legally tied to a child that wasn't mine. Simple as that, right? I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. Then came the family drama. A few weeks later, my parents found out. I love my parents, but they have a very traditional set of values, and when they heard this news, they lost it. Completely lost it. They were yelling at me, calling me irresponsible and a disgrace. I tried to get a word in, but they wouldn't listen. I told them, Mom, Dad, it's not my kid. Jenny's making this up. But they weren't hearing it. It was like, once they decided I was responsible for this child, there was no changing their minds. There were a lot of heated arguments after that, words were said that I probably can't take back, and honestly, I'm still angry about it. My parents kept pressuring me to do the right thing, to step up as a father, even though I kept telling them it wasn't my child. It didn't matter to them. They said they didn't raise me to be irresponsible, that they couldn't believe I was denying my own child. Things got even crazier. I wasn't even in the same state when Jenny supposedly got pregnant. That's right, she was staying with a friend for the entire month. I told my parents this, and they just brushed it off, saying, people make mistakes. Yeah, this wasn't just a mistake. This was a complete fabrication that could quickly ruin my life. Fast forward to about 6 months into Jenny's pregnancy, and my entire family had basically cut me off. Every family dinner, every phone call, every text message was about how I needed to take responsibility for this child. I was going insane. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, and no matter what I said or did, no one believed me. Most of my friends were on my side, but even a couple of them started to question me, are you sure? Maybe you just don't remember? Finally, my parents gave me an ultimatum. If I didn't step up and act like a father, they were going to disown me. Cut me out completely. Kick me out of the family. I thought they were bluffing at first, but they weren't. They told me point blank that if I didn't comply, I wasn't welcome anymore. I wasn't part of the family. I can tell you, that hurt. I was angry, confused, and just plain heartbroken. These were the people who raised me, who were supposed to have my back, and they chose to believe someone else over me. My own family abandoned me, like I was nothing. It was brutal. Things got even weirder. After the baby was born, my mother was at the hospital, playing the role of the proud grandmother. What I didn't know until later was that Jenny was still refusing to get a paternity test, so I had to go through some legal procedures to get it done. The results came back, and guess what? Not my kid. 0% chance I was the father. When I got that document, I felt a mix of relief and pure rage. I sent the results to my parents, thinking, finally, they'll see the truth. They'll realize they were wrong, and everything will go back to normal. Nope. Instead, they started calling me nonstop, apologizing, offering me money, begging for my forgiveness. My dad even sent me a few $100s, as if that would fix everything. The truth is, I took the money. Yeah, I did. I felt like they owed it to me for putting me through all that crap. But forgive them? No way. I made it clear that if they were willing to throw me away over something like this, I wasn't risking opening myself up to that kind of betrayal again. Most of my friends were on my side, but some people and my therapist started saying things like, maybe you should give them another chance. They're your parents after all. I get it, I really do, but how do you forgive someone who was ready to abandon you? How do you trust parents who believed a lie over their own child? That's where I am now, stuck between knowing I did nothing wrong and wondering if I should try to mend things with my family. But every time I think about it, I remember how quickly they turned on me, and I can't shake the feeling that they abandoned me when I needed them most. Okay, so you'd think that after everything with my parents and Jenny's baby, things would calm down, right? Nope. Life had other plans for me. If proving I wasn't the father was supposed to be the end of it, I was dead wrong. Turns out, when people don't want to admit they're wrong, they'll go to extreme lengths to avoid taking responsibility. So, after the paternity test results came back and confirmed I wasn't the father, I thought, okay, now my parents will realize they messed up, and maybe things can go back to normal. But instead of the relief I expected, things got even messier. First off, Jenny completely lost it. She started spreading rumors around town that I'd faked the test results or somehow tampered with them. Yes, you heard that right. In her mind, I somehow convinced an entire lab to rig the results in my favor. How I would even do that, I have no idea. I'm just a regular guy, not some mastermind who knows how to manipulate DNA tests. But Jenny wasn't having any of it. She was determined to paint me as the villain in her story. She was telling people that I'd abandoned her and the baby, that I'd tricked everyone into thinking I wasn't the father. It made no sense, but it didn't matter. People started to believe her. Small town gossip spreads fast, and soon I was getting dirty looks in the grocery store, like I was some kind of monster. I even had people straight up asking me why I wasn't taking care of my child. It was infuriating. I had the test results proving I wasn't the father, but it seemed like no one cared. Jenny was playing the victim, and I was being blamed for something I had no part in. I'd never felt so helpless. It's one thing to be betrayed by your family, but it's a whole different level when the entire town thinks you're a bad person. And my parents, they were still trying to play nice, but it was clear they didn't know how to handle the situation either. My mother kept calling, leaving these long, emotional voicemails about how she just wanted her family back together. She didn't even mention what had happened. She just wanted to sweep everything under the rug, like nothing had ever happened. She even suggested we go out for dinner, as if that would magically fix all the damage. It wasn't just awkward, it was insulting. After everything they put me through, they thought a few family dinners and some fake smiles would make everything okay? No apologies, no acknowledgement of how badly they messed up, just let's move on. They didn't even realize how much trust they'd shattered. That's the thing, once trust is broken like that, it's not something you can fix with a meal and a hug. It takes real work, real effort to rebuild, and they weren't even willing to admit they were wrong. To make matters worse, my dad tried to bribe me. He literally sent me an email offering to buy me a new car if I would just come back to the family. Did they think they could buy my forgiveness? It was so out of touch with reality that I didn't even know how to respond. I just stared at the email for a good while, trying to figure out if it was some kind of sick joke. But no, my dad was serious. I didn't reply. I couldn't. What do you even say to something like that? They didn't care about fixing things the right way. They just wanted me back in their lives because it was convenient for them. The fact that they thought throwing money at me would solve everything really showed me how little they actually understood about what they'd done. But the worst part came when I found out that Jenny had started contacting people I knew, trying to drag them into her drama. She even reached out to my ex-girlfriend, Samantha, trying to convince her that I was a terrible person who abandoned his child. Sam and I hadn't spoken in years, and out of the blue, I get a text from her saying we needed to talk. I had no idea what she was talking about at first, but when she explained that Jenny had been messaging her, trying to stir up old stuff, I almost lost it. I called Jenny and told her to stop. I was done with the games, done with the lies, and I wasn't going to let her drag my friends and exes into her mess. But she just laughed and hung up. It was like talking to a brick wall. She was so caught up in her own fantasy world that nothing I said could get through to her. At that point, I seriously considered getting lawyers involved. I didn't want to go that far, but what other choice did I have? Jenny was out there ruining my reputation, my parents were enabling her behavior, and I felt like I had no one on my side. My best friends were supportive, of course, but even they didn't know the full extent of how bad things had gotten. Ultimately, I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep living in this constant state of stress, waiting for the next rumor to surface or the next crazy accusation to be made. I decided to cut ties completely, not just with Jenny, but with my parents as well. It wasn't easy. It was incredibly painful, actually, but I knew I had to put my own well-being first. Sometimes you have to walk away, even when it's the hardest thing to do. Yes, it was messy, it was complicated, but at least now I didn't have to constantly worry about the next disaster coming my way. I could finally breathe again. But if you'd told me a year ago that this is how things would end up, I absolutely wouldn't have believed you. Life's funny like that, I guess. Update 1. Okay, so if you've been following everything so far, you'd think that cutting ties with Jenny and my parents would be the end of the chaos. Like I thought, once I removed them from my life, everything would calm down and I could move on. But of course, it wasn't that simple. Cutting ties was just the beginning of another round of mess. A few weeks after I sent that email to my parents and blocked Jenny, I got a random message from an old high school classmate, Mike. We hadn't talked in years, and out of the blue he was asking how I was doing. I thought it was casual at first, but then he told me that my parents had contacted him. Now, Mike and I weren't even that close in school, so my parents contacting him was a huge red flag. Apparently, they'd been trying to get other people to talk to me. I'm talking old friends, distant relatives, even people I barely knew. They were all telling everyone that I was doing poorly and that they were worried about me. It was like they were trying to make me seem like the unstable one, and the worst part was, they were framing the whole thing as if I needed to apologize for cutting contact with them. Mike was cool about it. He knew something was up and wanted to give me a heads up, but it didn't stop there. Over the next few days, I started getting messages from all sorts of people. People I hadn't spoken to in years, people I'd only met a couple of times. They were all saying the same things: your parents are really worried about you, or you should give them another chance. It was insane. They'd somehow convinced all these people that I was the bad guy in this situation, that I was the one who'd gone off the rails and needed to make amends. I couldn't believe it. I was trying to live my life, and my parents were out here running a full-on PR campaign to make me look like a villain. I felt like I was living in some weird alternate reality where nothing made sense. No matter how hard I tried to distance myself from the drama, it always found its way back to me. The final straw came when my parents contacted my boss. Yes, you heard that right. My parents called my work. I don't know how they got the number, but they somehow found my boss's contact information and called the office saying they were worried about me and that I wasn't doing well. Can you imagine how humiliating that was? Having your boss pull you into his office one day, looking all serious, asking if everything was okay at home? I was mortified. I didn't even know what to say. It's like, how do you even explain to your boss that your parents think you've gone off the deep end? I explained the whole situation to him, and thankfully, he was very understanding. He even apologized for bringing it up, but the damage was already done. My own parents were out there trying to sabotage my job. It felt like they were determined to ruin everything for me, just because I wouldn't bend to their will. After that, I had no choice but to get a lawyer and start the process of filing a restraining order against them. I didn't want to go that far, but what other option did I have? They were interfering with my career, my friendships, my peace of mind. I had to protect myself, even if it meant legally cutting them out of my life. The process was long and stressful, with court dates, paperwork, and a whole lot of anxiety that came with it. But at the same time, I felt a strange sense of relief, like I was finally taking control of the situation. No more letting them invade every part of my life, no more letting them manipulate the narrative. Of course, all hell broke loose when they found out about the restraining order. My mother sent me this long, guilt-ridden email about how she never imagined her own son would do this, and how family should stick together no matter what. She kept saying that I was tearing the family apart, that I was the one causing all the pain. It was classic manipulation, but I wasn't falling for it. I didn't reply. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but things got worse before they got better. One day, I came home from work to find my car vandalized. Someone had keyed the word liar into the side of the car. I had no proof that it was my parents, but really, who else could it be? I'd only told a few close friends about the restraining order. My parents were the only ones with a motive to do something like that. It was like they couldn't stand losing control, so they had to lash out in any way they could. I filed a police report, but nothing came of it. It was just another reminder that even when you're trying to do the right thing, sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most can turn into your worst enemies. After that, I started parking my car at a friend's house just to be safe. I couldn't take any more chances. I even installed security cameras around my apartment, just in case they tried anything else. It felt like I was living in a constant state of fear, always worried about the next disaster that was going to strike. But eventually, things started to quiet down. The restraining order went into effect, and my parents were officially barred from contacting me or coming near my home or workplace. It was a huge weight off my shoulders. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could finally breathe. It's been several months now, and I'm still picking up the pieces. I've had to do a lot of damage control with my friends and colleagues, explaining the whole situation and making sure they know the truth. Most of them have been supportive, but there are still some who are skeptical, like, "Are you sure your parents would really do all that?" I get it. It's hard to believe, but when you've lived through it, you know how far some people will go when they feel like they're losing control. Looking back, I never imagined things would escalate this far. It's crazy how quickly family can turn on you when you refuse to play by their rules. But I've learned some important lessons through all of this. You can't let anyone, not even your family, dictate how you live your life. Sometimes you have to make the difficult choice to walk away, even when it hurts. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day they'll realize what they've done and genuinely apologize. Maybe they won't. But either way, I'm done letting them control my life. I have my own path to forge, and I'm not looking back. Update 3. Okay, so if you've been following everything up to this point, you'd think that after the legal battles and the restraining order, the craziness would finally be over. But no, my family found another way to surprise me. This time, honestly, it just made me shake my head because I didn't think they could possibly sink any lower. But here we are. So, a few months after the court ruling in my favor, things finally started to calm down. I was able to focus on rebuilding my life, no more random messages from old acquaintances, no more letters from lawyers, just peace. Or at least, I thought. One day, I was out running errands, just doing normal stuff like grocery shopping, and I ran into my cousin, Melissa. Now, Melissa and I hadn't really talked much throughout this whole ordeal. We were never super close growing up, but we always got along well enough. So when I saw her, I thought, why not say hello? We chatted for a bit, and at first everything was perfectly normal, catching up on life, work, the usual stuff. But then, out of nowhere, she asked me, "Have you heard what your parents are planning?" I froze. "Planning?" I asked, a familiar knot forming in my stomach. Melissa looked a little uncomfortable, like she wasn't sure if she should be telling me, but she sighed and went on. "They're having a big family gathering next month. Apparently, they've been telling everyone that they're hoping it will be a reconciliation between you and them." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were actually planning some kind of ambush party, trying to force me back into the family. I asked Melissa for more details, and it turned out they'd invited everyone, distant relatives, family friends, people I hadn't seen in years. And, to top it all off, they'd been telling everyone I would be there, acting like I was in on the whole thing. I was furious. I hadn't agreed to anything, and now they were setting me up to be the bad guy again. If I didn't show up, it would be another classic move by my parents to manipulate the situation, make me look like the villain, and try to guilt-trip me into doing what they wanted. I thanked Melissa for letting me know and told her point blank that I wasn't going. She understood, but even she seemed a little hesitant, like she'd bought into my parents' narrative of "we just want to fix things." I could tell she wanted me to go, to make things right, but after everything they'd done, there was no way I was walking into that trap. I went home that night and really thought about what to do. I knew I wasn't going to the party, but a part of me felt like I needed to say something. I couldn't just ignore it. So I decided to send my parents one final message, to lay everything out once and for all. The next morning, I sat down and wrote them an email. It wasn't long, but it was direct. I told them that I knew about the party and that I wasn't planning on attending. I made it clear that I didn't want to be part of any forced reconciliation, especially not in front of a crowd of people. I told them that if they were truly serious about mending things, they needed to respect my boundaries first, and until they could do that, there was nothing more to discuss. I wasn't expecting any response, and honestly, I didn't need one. I just needed to get it off my chest. But of course, my parents couldn't just let it go. A few days later, my dad called me. I didn't answer, but he left this long, rambling voicemail about how I was tearing the family apart, and how this party was supposed to be a fresh start for all of us. He even tried to guilt-trip me by saying, "Your grandparents would be so disappointed in how you're handling this." That voicemail really hit a nerve, not because I believed it, but because it reminded me of how many times my parents had used guilt and manipulation to get their way. They would do anything to make me feel like I was the one in the wrong, even if it meant dragging my grandparents into it, who, by the way, have been nothing but supportive throughout this whole thing. It's like they couldn't grasp that maybe, just maybe, they were the ones who needed to do some serious self-reflection. I didn't return the voicemail. What was the point? I'd already said my piece, and I wasn't going to let them pull me back into their drama. But that didn't mean it didn't weigh on me. For the next few days, I kept thinking about the party, thinking about all the relatives who were going to be there, thinking that I was just refusing to reconcile. I wondered how many of them actually knew the whole story, how many of them had been fed the twisted version my parents were giving them. The party came and went, and I didn't hear anything from my parents afterward. I saw some pictures on Facebook, happy faces, family hugs, the whole 9 yards. My parents were smiling, acting like everything was fine, like they hadn't just tried to destroy my life. It was surreal to see them doing that, pretending everything was perfect, but I guess that's what they've always been good at, pretending. A few weeks later, I ran into Melissa again, and she told me the party had been awkward. Apparently, a lot of people had been expecting me to be there, and when I didn't show, there were some uncomfortable conversations. My parents tried to explain my absence, but according to Melissa, it didn't go over very well. Some of the relatives even started questioning why I hadn't come, and why my parents weren't being more forthcoming. I listened to her, and I just couldn't believe it. They were actually trying to paint me as the one who was being unreasonable, the one who was refusing to reconcile. It was like a light bulb went off in my head. This is who they've always been. They create narratives, they manipulate situations, and they always make themselves out to be the victims. It made me realize that there was no point in arguing with them or trying to explain myself. They were never going to admit they were wrong, and they were never going to take responsibility for their actions. It brought me a sense of closure, a strange kind of relief. Because I knew then that I didn't have to waste any more time or energy trying to reason with them. I'd done everything I could, and now it was time to move on and build my own life, far away from their drama and manipulation. I know it probably sounds extreme, cutting ties with your family, but sometimes it's what you have to do. Sometimes, you have to protect your own mental health, even if it means sacrificing relationships with the people you love. I know it's a long process, and healing takes time, but I know I'll eventually find my own peace. I know I'll find my own happiness, far away from all this family drama. This is probably the last time I'll write about these things. Maybe one day I'll look back on all of this and feel differently. But for now, I just need to keep moving forward, focusing on myself, and creating a life free from their drama and manipulation. I've managed to distance myself from the drama, but I know it's always lurking beneath the surface. My parents may never admit they were wrong, and I've come to accept that. I can't change them, but what I can do is protect myself and continue building my life without their influence, focusing on the people who truly care about me. It's been a long road, and I'm not going to lie, it still hurts sometimes. Cutting ties with family isn't easy, and there are times when I question if I made the right choice. But deep down, I know I had to. I had to choose myself, my mental health, and my own future over the toxic cycle they kept trying to pull me into. So, yeah, that's the end of this crazy journey. Maybe things will change someday, maybe they won't, but either way, I'm no longer letting my family control my life. I have my own path to walk, and for the first time, I'm walking it on my own terms.